My daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone, laughing at the cheap gift I gave her. What she didn't know, it was worth more than a Bitcoin. I stayed silent. But deep inside, I was planning something she'd never forget. What followed changed everything. Before continue, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's free and only way to support us. Thank you. You know, I've never cared much for flashy things. I'm the type of guy who still wears the same leather watch from 1992 and gets excited when the newspaper lands right at the door. But this one started with something flashy. Something small. A coin. It was David and Emma's wedding anniversary. 5 years. They were hosting this big dinner party with candlelit centerpieces, overpriced appetizers, and a playlist that sounded like a Spotify mix curated by someone who thinks jazz and EDM go together. Now, David is my only son. And Emma, his wife, is the type who treats compliments like currency. She trades smiles for attention and walks like she owns every room she enters. I've always tolerated her. Never really liked her, but I kept the peace. For David's sake. That night, I arrived with a carefully wrapped gift. Nothing grand in size. Just a small wooden box. Polished, simple, elegant. Carried something close to my heart, an antique gold coin from the 1800s. A piece my father once gave me when I graduated from high school. Not flashy. Not new. But valuable, more than most people would guess. And priceless to me. Dinner went smoothly. Fake laughs, clinking glasses, subtle digs that pretended to be jokes. You know the drill. Then came the gift exchange. One by one, everyone handed over bags with expensive perfumes, brand-name watches, wine from countries they couldn't even pronounce. Then Emma got to mine. She opened the lid, paused, and pulled the coin out between her fingers like it was a lint-covered button. And then, she laughed. Not the kind of laugh that invites others in. No, the kind of laugh that slices through you, sharp, intentional, loud. She looked around and said something like, "Oh my God! What is this? Did he just give me a coin? Is this some ancient chocolate or what?" People laughed. Not all of them, but enough to sting. Some looked away, pretending not to hear. Others chuckled nervously. David didn't say a word. I sat there, my hands folded, my blood boiling under my skin like a kettle on the verge of screaming. I felt a crack, not just in my pride, but in my relationship with him. With David. With everything I thought we stood for as a family. She tossed the coin back in the box and set it aside like it was a broken paperweight. If only she knew what she just mocked. That coin wasn't just a piece of metal. It was history. Legacy. My father's handwriting on a memory I kept locked in my chest. It had survived more storms than her Instagram stories ever would. But she didn't care. Because it didn't sparkle. Because it didn't come in a branded bag with shiny ribbon. I kept my mouth shut that night. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't explain its value. Didn't demand an apology. No. I made a decision. A quiet one. That humiliation would not go unanswered. Emma thought she laughed at a cheap gift. But what she really did was wake up a storm. And storms? They don't announce themselves with thunder. They strike when no one's looking. That night, after the laughter died and the plates were scraped clean, I drove home in silence. No radio. No humming. Just the dull throb of embarrassment echoing in my chest like an old wound reopening. Every red light I hit on the drive home felt personal, like the universe was slowing me down just to stew in it longer. When I got home, I sat on my recliner, still wearing my ironed shirt, shoes unlaced, and just stared into the dark. I didn't cry. No, I'm not built that way. But something inside me cracked. Something that had been steady for years, decades, even. I had spent my whole life building dignity, brick by brick. And in one careless moment, my daughter-in-law knocked a piece of it loose with a laugh. The thing that stung the most wasn't the coin. It wasn't the humiliation in front of all those people. It was David, my own son. He didn't say a word. Didn't lift a finger to stop it. Didn't glance in my direction. Like I was some distant relative from a forgotten town who accidentally wandered into the party. It hit me then, I had raised a boy who could let that happen. And that broke me more than anything. I thought back to when I gave him that coin when he was a kid. He held it like it was treasure. He even called it his pirate coin and hid it in his sock drawer. Back then, it was more than gold, it was magic. It had weight. It meant something. What happened to that? What happened to him? I reached for the coin box, the one Emma had left behind. She didn't even take it home. It was still in the car, shoved to the side like trash. When I opened it, the velvet inside was scratched, and the coin had a smudge of wine on it. I cleaned it gently, like I was wiping away the insult itself. And then, I just stared at it. That coin wasn't just a relic, it was a test. A test of character. Of values. Of respect. And Emma? She failed that test miserably. David didn't even take the exam. But I passed mine. I kept my cool. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I let the moment pass. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't taste right when it's hot. It needs to simmer. To stew. To grow teeth. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. I was going to teach them a lesson. One they wouldn't forget. And I wouldn't do it with anger or yelling. I'd do it with precision. Emma thought she was clever, mocking an old man's gift like it was beneath her. But what she didn't realize was this old man had a sharper mind than she ever would. And a heart full of stories she couldn't begin to understand. I turned off the lights, coin still in hand. And I made a promise to myself. They would know what that coin was really worth. Not just in money, but in meaning. And I wouldn't have to say a single word to prove it. The next morning, with the weight of last night still sitting heavy on my shoulders, I went straight to the old cabinet in my study. Not the one with the dusty novels and family albums, no, the one behind the sliding wood panel. My little vault of forgotten treasures. Stuff even David didn't know existed. I pulled out the binder where I'd kept appraisals, letters, certificates. All organized, tagged, and protected like sacred relic. There it was, tucked neatly in a plastic sleeve, my father's original appraisal of that coin. Dated 1983. Value at the time, $4,000. But the market had changed since then. I took out my phone and sent a message to Martin, a longtime friend and antique coin dealer. If anyone could tell me what this coin was worth now, it was him. By noon, I was sitting in his downtown office with the coin on a velvet mat under a magnifying lamp. He examined it like a surgeon performing heart surgery, steady hands, quiet concentration. When he looked up, his eyebrows were practically on the ceiling. "Do you know what you have here?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I think so. But I want to hear it from you." He leaned back and told me everything I already suspected, except worse. Or better, depending on how you look at it. The coin wasn't just rare. It was one of the few Victorian-era sovereigns minted in error. An unintentional press misalignment, barely noticeable to the untrained eye, made it a goldmine for collectors. Combined with its condition and original lineage? Estimated value, $85,000 minimum. $85,000. My jaw didn't drop. I just smiled. Emma had tossed it aside like it was a rusty washer from a broken faucet. But now? Now I knew my revenge wouldn't just be emotional, it would be poetic. I thanked Martin and tucked the coin back into its box, holding it like I was cradling a piece of forgotten royalty. On the drive home, I started planning. But not the kind of revenge that involves yelling in someone's face or storming into a dinner party with receipt. No. That's amateur stuff. This would be psychological. Emma would discover the truth herself, but by then, it would be too late to undo her insult. Because I wasn't going to tell her. I was going to let her figure it out. Slowly. Painfully. And I'd make it look like it was all just coincidence. Like fate had turned its wheel. And crushed her ego with it. You see, some people can't be taught with kindness. They need to be taught with silence. And the quiet sound of realization slapping them across the face. That's the music I was now waiting to hear. From that day on, I wore a smile like armor. I played dumb. I acted like nothing had happened at that party. As if the laughter, the mockery, the humiliation had never reached my ears. I didn't bring up the coin. Didn't even mention the party to David or Emma. Just small talk, weather updates, and awkward chuckles over Sunday lunch. And that's when I noticed something. Emma's tone had changed. She wasn't exactly nice, but she had shifted from condescending to curious. Suddenly, she wanted to talk more. Asked what I used to do before retirement. Asked about my old hobbies. Even made me a cup of herbal tea one afternoon, which nearly made me drop dead from shock. And that's when it hit me, she was fishing. Fishing for information. You see, Emma may be shallow, but she's not stupid. Somewhere, somehow, something must have tipped her off about the coin. Maybe someone mentioned Victorian gold coins. Maybe she got bored one evening, searched online for antique coin values. Maybe her greed simply got the better of her. Either way, she was sniffing around. So I decided to toss her a breadcrumb. I mentioned casually that I'd found a few more coins, while cleaning the garage. "Oh," she said, pretending not to care, even though her eyes nearly popped out of her head. "Yeah," I shrugged. "Nothing much. Old stuff. Probably worthless." She bit her lip. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. I let the silence linger, just enough to let her wonder. Then I changed the subject. She was hooked. A few days later, she dropped by my place alone. Brought banana bread, which tasted suspiciously like it had been bought 5 minutes earlier and unwrapped in her car. "Oh, I was in the neighborhood," she said, trying to act casual. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing." "Yeah, right." She sipped her tea, glanced around the living room, and then dropped the question like a feather she hoped I wouldn't notice. "So, those coins you mentioned the other day, you still have them?" I blinked, feigning surprise. "Oh, those? Yeah. Somewhere. You want to see them?" She tried to hide her excitement. "I mean, if it's not too much trouble." I pulled out an old shoebox filled with random coins. Some real, some replicas. A mix of international currency and trinket. And buried inside, right at the bottom, was a small velvet pouch. Identical to the one I had used for the gift. I handed it to her with a casual shrug. "No idea if any of them are worth anything." She opened it like a raccoon discovering a shiny object. Inside was a coin with a similar color and weight, but it wasn't the real one. Just a decent replica I had picked up from an online collector's store a while ago. Cost me $50. Looked like $1 million. Her pupils dilated. I could tell she was dying to ask questions. But instead, she slipped the pouch into her purse with a "Thanks. I'll look into it for you." For me? Oh, how generous. She left smiling that day. But me? I was grinning ear to ear. Because now the game had begun. And I had home court advantage. Emma wasn't subtle. Not even a little. Over the next week, she kept texting me random questions about coins. Where did I buy them? Did I collect them as a kid? Did I have any more? It was like watching a squirrel try to steal a diamond, desperate, twitchy, and absolutely hilarious. She even invited me and David over for dinner, just us this time. Her tone had changed completely. She called me Dad more than once. She asked if I liked the wine. She even laughed at my horrible knock-knock jokes, jokes that normally make people leave the room. I just played along. Let her flatter me like I was the King of England. David seemed confused. Poor guy didn't have a clue what was going on. He thought Emma was finally warming up to me after years of keeping me at arm's length. In reality, she was trying to dig gold out of an old man with a crooked smile and a shoebox of coins. And just when I knew she was completely under the spell, I dropped the bait. I told her, casually, while buttering my bread, that someone I knew from my old days in the business had seen one of my coins and said it might be worth a lot. "How much is a lot?" she asked, trying to sound disinterested while nearly choking on her water. "Oh, I don't know," I said with a shrug. "He said it could fetch maybe 60,000–70,000. I wasn't really paying attention." She went quiet for the first time all evening. David's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Emma tried to play it cool. But her eyes were practically screaming. "Do you still have it?" she asked. I wiped my mouth slowly, gave a half smile and said, "Well, it might be the one I gave you at the party. You still have that one, right?" The silence could have cooked the steak. She nodded slowly. "Yeah. I think it's somewhere." Somewhere. Of course it was. Probably stashed in the back of her closet under a pile of handbags she never used. She asked if I was thinking about selling it. I told her I might. Said someone had offered me $100,000 for it just to beat another bidder. I added that I hadn't decided yet, it had sentimental value. That word hit her hard. Sentimental. She shifted in her seat like she was sitting on hot coal. Because suddenly, the coin she mocked as Monopoly money now had a price tag bigger than her engagement ring. And it belonged to her. At least, she thought it did. The next day, she called me and offered to buy it back. Said she'd keep it in the family. I asked how much she was offering. She said, "Get this, $500. $500. For a coin she now believed was worth over 100,000. I nearly burst out laughing. But I kept a straight face. Said I'd think about it. Then hung up the phone. And laughed until my stomach hurt. Because Emma had no idea. That coin in her possession wasn't even the real one. And the real one? Oh, it was getting ready to shine. Just not in her hands. At this point, Emma was in deep. She wasn't just interested, she was obsessed. Every conversation somehow circled back to coins, antiques, or the market value of old family heirlooms. I'd never seen her read anything longer than a makeup blog, but now she was quoting obscure articles about gold appraisal and coin grading. I could almost smell the desperation leaking through her foundation. She began texting me pictures of random coins she found online, asking if they were valuable. She even asked if I could teach her how to spot a real one. I said sure, maybe someday. Just to mess with her. She started bringing up the coin more directly now, asking if I was serious about selling it. I reminded her gently, like a wise old monk, that it wasn't just a coin, it was a memory. That I didn't care about the money. That line drove her crazy. You could practically hear her teeth grinding through the screen. Then one day David called. Out of the blue. He sounded hesitant. He said Emma told him I was sitting on a huge opportunity, and maybe it was time to think about the family's future. I asked him plainly, "Do you even know what coin we're talking about?" He went quiet. I told him, "The coin your wife laughed at in front of everyone. That one." Long pause. Then he mumbled something about how things had gotten out of hand and how maybe we could put it behind us. Put it behind us? They mocked me like I was a joke. Tried to buy my dignity back for pennies. And now they wanted to put it behind us. I told David I'd think about it. And then I thought about something else instead. A plan. A good one. I waited a few days. Then called Emma and told her I'd made a decision. I said I was going to auction the coin after all. Publicly. He owed me. 1 page. 1 coin. Nothing more. She freaked. Tried to play it cool, but her voice cracked. She asked which auction house. I gave her the name of a small, high-end antique auction company, one that did private listings. I knew she'd search for it. I wanted her to. Because the next part? That's when I called in a favor from an old friend who still worked there. I told him I needed a fake auction listing. Estimated value, $125,000. Just something convincing enough to make one greedy daughter-in-law think the coin she discarded like garbage had just become a golden ticket. And the next time Emma visited? I left that printout on my kitchen table, folded just enough to look accidental. She saw it. Didn't say a word. But her hand trembled when she reached for her tea. That's when I knew. She finally understood the price of her pride. But we weren't done. Not yet. Because what's greed without a little public embarrassment at the end? Oh no, this was just the appetizer. The main course was still cooking. After Emma's accidental discovery of the auction listing I forgot on my kitchen table, things started to shift. Fast. I could practically feel the panic radiating from their house. And it didn't take long before David came knocking. He showed up alone. No call. No warning. He just stood at my door like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Not quite sure what to say. His eyes were tired, confused, like someone who finally realized they've been sleeping next to a ticking bomb. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. Same one where I left the auction listing. I could tell he'd seen it, probably had it bookmarked on his phone by now. He tried to break the silence with small talk. Asked about my garden, my knees, even the neighbor's cat, which he'd never once cared about. But I waited. And eventually, he dropped the act. He asked, "Is it true? Is that coin really worth over 100 grand? I just looked at him. Took my time. Then I said, "Why does it matter now?" His face dropped. He knew what I was saying. Where was all this concern when Emma was publicly mocking me? When she held that coin like it was a gum wrapper and called it cheap? When he sat there, lips sealed, not even a glance in my direction, Now he cared. Now he was worried. He started saying things like, "It was just a joke, and you know how Emma is, and she didn't mean it like that." I cut him off. Told him this wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. About respect. About the fact that I raised him better than this. He looked away, probably remembering all the times I'd bailed him out, paid for his college, fixed his car, helped him buy his first house. And now, here he was, watching his wife humiliate me and staying silent. He finally apologized. Not a half-hearted one either. A real one. Said he messed up. Said Emma messed up. Said they both let their pride get in the way. I nodded, but I didn't forgive him. Not yet. Because I could tell. Deep down, the apology still had strings. David wasn't just here out of guilt. He was here because he knew what Emma knew now, that they'd thrown away something priceless. That I had the upper hand. And when people feel power slipping away, that's when their true colors start to bleed through. He asked me to reconsider the auction. Said the family name would be dragged through the mud if word got out. That people would talk. That Emma might lose her job at the fashion agency if this became gossip. I leaned back in my chair and said, "Then maybe you should have spoken up when it mattered." He had no reply. Just silence. Heavy, ashamed, overdue silence. Before he left, he asked me one last thing. "If you're not doing this for money, then what are you doing it for?" I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because the answer was so simple. I was doing it for something more valuable than money. Dignity. Legacy. And a lesson they'd never forget. I closed the door behind him and looked out the window as he walked away. He didn't look back once. But I knew he'd be back. Because now? He was caught between loyalty to his wife and the guilt of betraying his father. And the truth? He was running out of ways to make it right. The moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. Emma's birthday. She was turning 30. Of course, it wasn't just a birthday, it was a red carpet event disguised as a dinner party. A rented ballroom, flower walls, a custom cake taller than her ego, and a guest list that read like a social climber's dream. Influencers, PR agents, people with too many teeth and not enough sincerity. David invited me, probably out of guilt. Emma didn't say much. She just smiled at me through her teeth like I was a stubborn stain on her party dress. I accepted the invitation without hesitation. Because I had something planned. Something unforgettable. The night was over the top as expected. Cameras flashing. People pretending to care. Champagne flutes dancing between fingertips that couldn't hold a decent conversation if their lives depended on it. But I wasn't there for the cake. I was there for the climax. And I waited until just the right moment, right after the dinner, just before the speeches. When everyone was relaxed, full, and buzzing with sugar and gossip. I stood up. Clinked my glass. All eyes turned toward me. Including Emma's, which narrowed slightly. She wasn't expecting a toast from me. Exactly. I thanked everyone for coming. Complimented the event, the food, the decorations. Then I said I had brought a special gift for the birthday girl. One that had been given before. But perhaps misunderstood. A few people chuckled. Emma shifted uncomfortably. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Identical to the one I gave her months ago. I placed it gently on the table in front of her. Her face went pale. I looked around the room and said, "This coin here, this little trinket, was once mocked as being worthless. A joke, even. But here's what most of you don't know." I opened the box slowly, revealing the coin under the soft light. This is a 19th century Victorian gold sovereign. Minted in limited quantity, with a historical flaw that made it a collector's dream. A hush fell over the room. It was appraised recently at over $125,000. But for me, its value goes far beyond that. It belonged to my father. It was a piece of our family history. A legacy. And it was gifted to someone who didn't understand what legacy means. I looked at Emma. She was frozen, lips tight, hands in her lap. Her friends looked at her with the kind of raised eyebrows that can shatter reputations. And then, I delivered the final blow, softly, politely, but with precision. I wanted to share this story not for revenge, but as a reminder that sometimes the things we dismiss too quickly are the very things we'll regret losing the most. I closed the box and handed it to a waiter. Please return this to the family vault, I said with a smile. It was never really gone. Applause broke out, not loud but real. From the people who got it. The ones who saw through glitter and gold and understood what I'd just done. Emma sat in silence, her entire kingdom crumbling around her, brick by shallow brick. I took my seat, sipped my drink, and smiled to myself. Not because I'd embarrassed her, but because I'd done it with grace. No shouting. No scenes. Just truth. And the truth? Is a beautiful thing. When served cold, in front of a crowd. After the party, Emma's silence was louder than her laughter had ever been. And believe me, that woman knew how to laugh, usually at someone else's expense. But now? She was a ghost with mascara. Smiling for pictures while her eyes screamed for an exit. Word spread faster than champagne bubbles. People talked. Oh, did they talk? The same guests who once fought for a selfie with her were now whispering behind their wine glasses. Some were even bold enough to say things like, "Can you believe she didn't recognize that coin?" Or, "I heard she tried to buy it back for $500. And just like that, her glittery little world cracked. She tried to control the narrative, of course. Claimed she knew what the coin was. Said it was all part of some inside joke between us. Yeah, right. An inside joke that made you look like a clown in Chanel. Her influencer friends, those flaky little moths that hover around the brightest flame, began fluttering toward new flames. She noticed. The likes on her posts slowed down. The brand calls stopped. Even her agency began assigning the premium clients to someone else. And David? He was caught in the middle of the storm. He came to visit me one Sunday. No Emma. Just him. Hoodie on. Slouched shoulders. He looked like a deflated football. He apologized again. Said things had been tense. That Emma wasn't speaking to him much. That he didn't know how things spiraled so fast. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. The damage was already done. I told him calmly, "Son, there are things in life you can't buy back. Time, trust, and first impressions." He nodded slowly, taking it all in. Then he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad. She wants to give the coin back." I chuckled, not out of humor but disbelief. I said, "She never had the real one." David blinked. "What?" I looked him straight in the eye. "The coin she had was a replica. Worth $50 if that. The real one? It's been in my safe the whole time." He sat there frozen. Then leaned back and sighed, one of those long, soul-emptying sighs. "I knew it was too good to be true," he muttered. But he didn't sound angry. Just tired. And maybe, deep down, a little relieved. Because the truth had finally peeled back all the polish. Emma's pride had been exposed. Her shallowness? Broadcasted. And me? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't throw insults. Didn't clap back online. I simply let the truth do its thing. And the fallout? It was better than anything I could have planned. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting someone ruin themselves while thinking they've outsmarted you. All you have to do is step aside. After everything settled, the silence was almost sweet. Like the air right after a storm, fresh, calm, with the smell of humility lingering in the breeze. Emma stopped coming around for a while. No surprise there. The embarrassment had stuck to her like glitter after a party, annoying, inescapable, and a constant reminder of what she tried to sweep under the rug. David still visited me though. More than before, and without the awkwardness he used to carry. He seemed lighter, like a man who had finally taken off someone else's coat and was starting to feel like himself again. We talked, not just about coins and antiques but about real things. Life, regrets, values. One afternoon, he asked if I would ever sell the real coin. I told him no. Not because of the money. Not because of Emma. But because that coin was my father's. A part of our bloodline. A reminder that legacy isn't just what you pass down in money, it's the stories, the moments, the dignity you carry through the years. And for the first time in a long while, he understood. Emma eventually came back around. Not as bold, not as loud. She didn't apologize, not with words, anyway. But her posture did. Her eyes did. She never brought up the coin again. Never mocked another one of my gifts. In fact, she once handed me a dusty old book she'd found at a thrift store and said, "This reminded me of something you might like." That was her olive branch. I accepted it. Not because I forgave her completely, but because I'd already won. You see, revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like dignity, like silence, like letting someone show the world exactly who they are, and watching the world respond accordingly. Emma learned that legacy isn't measured in price tags or packaging. It's in how you treat people, how you honor the past, how you carry yourself when no one's watching. That coin still sits in my safe. Not because I'm hoarding wealth, but because it reminds me that the things we think are small can hold the most power. That respect, once lost, costs more than gold. So now, every time someone laughs off something cheap, I just smile. Because the people who laugh the loudest usually don't know what they're laughing at. And that coin? It did more than sit in a box. It exposed a heart, revealed a character, and reminded me that even in a world obsessed with surface, depth still wins. If you're still watching, remember this. What seems worthless to one might be priceless to another. Watch the next story. You're not ready for what happens next. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's free and only way to support us. Thank you.